What is happening, everyone? Just going to walk through what I'm looking at today and a bit of a recap. Yesterday, I did have my first winning trade of the week, a sell here, which was a 1 to 3, and ended up being kind of the push back up. I'm not surprised with that major inducement, but here we go, coming into today. So I would say we're probably placed in the worst spot we could be from the week. Not a lot to work with. Okay, now sells still are the higher time frame play. Still makes more sense to sell, but we are due for a retracement, and given what has kind of happened, it makes sense to retrace from where we are. So we have had an internal break of structure, and we've come into a supply on GU, and then we've obviously pushed back from that supply in a very aggressive manner. So realistically, the best case scenario is following along with this bearish momentum. Now, if we kind of look what we've got in here, we've got a really, really small demand to supply that sits in here. So this is a good point to look at. And realistically just selling off the mitigation of that. So looking at something like that. Now, it looks like we're going to push through this with the momentum we're getting. We did off of that internal break. We had our next internal break, and this did take liquidity. We've then taken the next lot of liquidity. So it does make sense to kind of get this reaction now, which is what I've trying to get all week. We just haven't had it. We still haven't broken external structure. So what I am open to is basically watching this area and trying to understand if it's a trap or not. I think it will be. So ideally getting that push down into our area of demand and then buying off that, taking out that liquidity. Now, what actually makes sense is just liquidity versus liquidity is kind of coming and taking this high. So there's multiple ways to look at this. The higher value areas are sell here or sell here. But if we do buy using this first area as our buyer's trap, our seller's trap will be ideal. Now, whether or not that happens, we'll obviously have to wait and see. But internally, that makes the most sense. Like I said, this is a valid point. It's a very, very shitty point. I do want to see this point get taken, so I'm leaning towards more this point getting taken, which means I want to see it as a trap to come and buy through it, whether that's to sell from here or take that buy long term and take some liquidity to the upside. So like I said, very, very bad point we're opening in today. Not a lot to work with, but that's kind of the two options I've got coming into today. We've necessarily guessed the whole and predicted the entire market movement so far. There just hasn't been a lot this week. As you can see, very, very choppy price action between the two sessions. A lot of movement comes at the start of Asia, which is very, very odd. But it is what it is. That is the market conditions we are presented with. Now, EU, more or less the same. We have come into a really, really good decisional point here. So very, very good demand. We have broken internal structure, but we have, just like GU, mitigated an area of supply that did break through a 15-minute low. So more or less the same thing. EU actually makes more sense for sells given the current scenario, but all of the liquidity at the moment is to the upside. So we'll kind of have to see what happens here. I really do like sells off of this high. You've got simple 15-minute structure here, and then you've got this area of retail liquidity retest sitting here where we can look to sell off of that, coming and taking this. By taking this point and then selling, it also proves that this point's a trap, so you can use those two together. And then we would basically looking at targeting, this low, this low, this low, and then taking those equal lows. So I think that'll be a really good way to finish off the week. So hopefully we can get that entry today. But you've got to understand we haven't had a retracement. We haven't had a really good inducement to the upside. It still makes sense to come and take this high, given that this was a high after the break. So this does hold more than this area. So we may find that given how slow this retracement is here, that we get a trap reaction through here to buy through and take this high. So this is a very, very, I guess, big draw on liquidity coming into today. So we'll have to kind of work out what the go is as quickly as possible. Are we selling? Are we buying? Sells make the most sense given the current market conditions, but we'll obviously see what happens. USDCAD actually had an entry yesterday. I was caught GU instead, but this entry was very, very clean. It's coming down for that liquidity, which I said it's definitely coming for. So as this moves down, GU and EU will move up anyway, so it makes a lot of sense. No entries in here, nothing to work with so far. Once it takes this low, buyers will be on. Buyers are a very good point from the take of this, so I'll set my alert. As for a couple of other pairs, AU I was watching today, I was in a sell from here. Just with the current market conditions, this pair seemed okay for me to trade during the day, but not really seeing a lot now. Realistically, we need to come and take this high for me to even look at anything. So once we get up here, I'm okay to actually start selling, but until we get there, not interested. UJ, we're at a point where sells now make sense, and that makes sense given that all the other pairs are at a point where they can buy. So using this point as a trap makes a lot of sense. So I'll set an alert here, and keep an eye on this coming into the session as well. So something like, oops, like this. Makes a lot of sense. Where this is positioned, we are against the external momentum, but we haven't had that retracement, just like on all the other pairs. Now, gold predicted perfectly yesterday. Didn't get tagged in the entry. I would still be holding it anyway. I probably would have closed out at about a 1 to 5 or a 1 to 6. Very, very good entry. So if you followed that yesterday, you caught a really, really good entry. As for what's happening now with gold, we're pushing back up, taking enough liquidity. We haven't broken this low, which means this high didn't hold enough. So we should realistically be coming for this high where we can look to start to buy gold again. So we'll obviously see what happens. But I'll keep you guys updated in the Telegram. Not a lot to go over this week, unfortunately. It's been a very, very slow week. But let's stay in tune with price action, see what we can do today, and finish this week off strong.